Good morning to our US-based viewers and our in-person audience here at the Atlantic Council Studios, and good afternoon to those watching in Europe. And thank you for joining us. My name is Jan Fleck, and I'm the Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Europe Center. And I'm especially pleased this morning to welcome you all to this timely discussion with Admiral Giuseppe Cavo Dragone, Italy's Chief of Defense. Admiral Dragone, thank you for joining us at the Atlantic Council Studios today. We're very much looking forward to the conversation with you, Admiral, to explore Italy's current and future role in transatlantic security amid a geopolitical rewiring of Europe. In recent years, we've seen Italy step up as a leader in responding to critical challenges facing the European Union and the Atlantic Alliance. Most notably, Rome has responded resolutely to Russia's illegal, full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of last year, by sending military and financial assistance to Kyiv, by supporting unprecedented EU economic sanctions against Moscow, and by accepting more than 170,000 Ukrainian refugees at home. Italy and its new government under Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni have anchored that support for Ukraine and its Eastern European allies within the framework of NATO and the EU. Elsewhere in Europe, Rome has continued its perhaps underappreciated engagement in the Western Balkans as part of Quint and EU efforts to bring about progress in the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, as a contributor to security forces including KFOR, and as a major trading and investment partner across the Western Balkans 6. And while much of our attention has rightfully been focused on the alliance's east, in light of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, ongoing crises in North Africa, the Levant, humanitarian concerns around migration, and a complex energy transition all place Italy's roles at the forefront of much-needed engagement with Europe's neighbors to the south as well. So as a steadfast transatlantic ally and the third largest economy in the EU, a major energy and security provider, and with its diplomatic efforts in the wider Mediterranean region, Italy continues to redefine its leadership role in geopolitically treacherous times. At the Atlantic Council's Europe Center and our Middle East programs, we're determined to engage with decision makers and thought leaders in Rome to see Italy live up to its full potential in Europe and in the Atlantic Alliance. To discuss all of this and more, we're lucky to have Admiral Dragone here today to speak from his wealth of experience on Italian, European, and transatlantic defense affairs in light of the many challenges in Europe's east and south. Serving as Italy's Chief of Defense since November 2021, he has completed more than 20 years of continuous distinguished service as a commanding officer, recently serving as Chief of Staff of the Italian Navy, as a commander of both Italy's Joint Operations Command and its Special Operations Headquarters. Admiral Dragone received flight training during numerous stints in the United States, was carrier qualified on the USS Lexington, and combat certified on multiple helicopters and aircraft. He's a military paratrooper and scuba diver, freefall skydiver, and karate black belt, so Clementine, watch out. Admiral Dragone, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us today. Following your opening remarks, my colleague Clementine Starling, Director of Fort Defense at our Scowcroft Center for Security and Defense, will moderate the conversation with the Admiral. And before I turn it over to you, Admiral, I'd also like to extend my special appreciation to our Senior Fellow Karim Mezran for his leadership in spearheading the Atlantic Council's growing programming on Italy. We look forward to expanding this body of work to deepen our understanding of Italy's role in transatlantic and global affairs. To our audience, I'd like to encourage you to follow along online, to join the conversation on social media by following along on Twitter using @ACEurope, @ACMidEast, and @Atlantic Council. With that, Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You will forgive my brutal English, but I have been trained by the Marine Corps, so please accept it. Well, I would like to thank the Atlantic Council for organizing this event. I also appreciate very much your invitation to be here today. I think it is appropriate to start my speech by taking a walk through the past. The scene is the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. The date is April 27, 1961, and President John Fitzgerald Kennedy is addressing the American Newspaper Association. And I quote, "I must talk about our common responsibility in the face of a common danger. The event of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate the challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large in the horizon for many years. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in mission, by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tight-knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operation," unquote. Today we are living through critical times indeed. Last September I released my strategic concept, and after a few months I can easily assess that the international outlook is evolving at an extraordinary fast pace and without precedent in modern history. As we enter the 14th month of military operation in Ukraine, China has taken its position in the conflict. In doing so, Beijing has released a 12-point document proposing a framework for a political settlement to the conflict raging in Europe. At the same time, in the Middle East, we see the Chinese brokering an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the resulting resumption of diplomatic relations. Saudi Arabia recently ratified a decision awarding Riyadh the status of dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political, security, and trade regional agreement that lists China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 other Central Asian nations as full members. At the same time, Iran is trying to improve its relations with the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Egypt. Turkey and Syria are in a phase of rapprochement supported by Russia and Iran. While we observe these actions, in the background, Syria and Iraq signed a security agreement in a further attempt to stabilize relations. After Algeria, now on a verge of an economical collapse, Tunisia seeks to join the BRICS. As we know, a group of fast-growing emerging industrial countries with diversified economies that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The demand for security has been surging in the wider Mediterranean and in many African regions. This is especially true where the Wagner Group, Russian and Iranian proxy states, and other transnational actors are active. Furthermore, we have to remind that terrorism is still a vicious threat that we cannot underestimate ever, even if it was not the most topical issue nowadays. These are major changes indeed. What is happening? Are these events I have just recounted connected? I have no easy answer. I merely provide with some ideas to feed our later discussion. Watching from the sky, the Earth looks like a giant chessboard where all pieces are in full motion. The eastern flank is the military priority for our alliance and we must deploy every possible effort to win this fight for democracy, freedom, and the indisputable right of each country to choose its own destiny. No doubt, we can never go back to the world we knew before Ukraine was invaded. There is now a widening consensus that NATO needs permanent forces and high-end capabilities deployed in Eastern Europe to deter Russia. Accordingly, I see with great favor the task of the Joint Force Command Norfolk to overwatch and connect the Atlantic with Northern Europe and the Arctic region. Right here are clear signs of a competitive push by some countries, Russia above all, aimed at securing privileged position in this strategic arena. In the medium term, there is a possibility that new routes of communication, North-West Passage, will emerge as an alternative to current ones, and that a huge amount of mineral and energetic resources will be soon exploitable. The 40-plus nations participating to the so-called Ukraine Contact Group are rightly focused on providing defense capability to Ukraine, as well as on coordinating future support, including reconstruction plans after the war. And why such group is focused on a single task, China is carrying out a vast and deliberate political and diplomatic offensive, and its goal is to expand Chinese influence across the countries in the so-called Global South. That accounts for almost 2/3 of global population. Those countries that have not condemned the Russian invasion and that stick to a neutral posture. In an unspoken challenge, Russia and Iran are deploying every possible political and military effort in an attempt to flank the Chinese strategy, break the Russia and Iran international isolation, and enlarge the sphere of influence. All these efforts also aim at opening new fronts to weaken our willingness to defend democracy and freedom. These actions must be actively countered. Perhaps this is the right time to reflect on our current strategy. Could it be we are missing something important or neglecting countries and the areas that are strategic for our security? The Ukraine crisis is clearly a geopolitical earthquake and is having ripple effect throughout the international scene. Crucial areas such as the Mediterranean basin, the Persian Gulf, and many strategic areas in Africa are at stake. We should react promptly to face this threat to peace and international stability. We are now aware that Russia made a bet on wrong assumption based on the perception of America's disengagement and of a divided Europe. Both these factors were regarded by Russia as a prerequisite for their success in the Ukraine invasion. Russia's bet proved to be disastrous. Moscow instead has been confronted with an extraordinary cohesion within NATO, European Union, and other countries in Asia and Pacific. The active support to our eastern and southeastern partners to strengthen their deterrence and defense posture has been prompt and swift within NATO and on a bilateral basis. NATO is the alliance, our very shield for defense and deterrence. The Madrid summit was the most important decision-making event of the last decade. The summit went far in confirming that NATO is keeping pace with the quickly changing security environment. The adoption of the 2022 strategic concept makes us better prepared to tackle the threats of the next decade. The fact that we are a strong and cohesive alliance is shown by our ability to come to agreement on our major interest and concern. This can be seen through the implementation of the Eastern Posture, the renewed focus on our southern flank, The clear confirmation of Russia as an active menace and the recognition of terrorism as a continued threat. In addition to our traditional transatlantic concern, our ability to reach a consensus in labeling China as a systemic challenge further underlines the cohesiveness of the alliance. The enlargement of NATO to include Sweden and Finland might require some additional decision-making and steering efforts, but in the end, we will become a stronger alliance. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has dramatically changed the perception of security in Europe. At this juncture of our effort to support Ukraine, we remain duly committed with our allies and partners, and the political and diplomatic level. What will happen this spring might be a turning point. The stalemate on the ground, a possible counter-offensive by the Ukrainian army, and the effects of sanctions on Russia's economy could encourage the relevant parties to address the conflict through political and diplomatic means. Italy showed no hesitation in assuming a proactive stance in support of the Eastern and Southeastern allies. We readily contributed and continue to support our fielded forces that include air, land, and naval assets. Our round-the-clock operation actively reinforced the overall alliance posture in continued response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I would highlight that Italy has once again proven to be a committed member of the NATO alliance by deploying troops and capabilities in reassurance of allies along the southeastern and eastern flank. Our overall effort accounts for 2,000 plus soldiers. As always, Italy will continue to support the commitments undertaken by the alliance while being especially mindful of and flexible as possible regarding the involvement of US assets based in Italy. Even with the ongoing war in Ukraine, we could identify additional challenges and threats stemming from other strategic directions. We are fully aware that the safeguarding of the southern flank implies yet more responsibilities for the Italian armed forces. We are reacting swiftly and effectively to these threats, as shown by the parliamentary approval in 2022 of our deployment abroad. This amounts to an average of about 8,000 personnel, besides dozens of aircraft and ships, all deployed on a daily basis and operating from the Gulf of Guinea to the northwestern Indian Ocean. The Mediterranean is a strategic crossroad making transit possible for the good and the bad. Yet, the political and socio-economic conditions of the countries of the southern shore are precarious and unstable indeed. On top of all this, sea routes are used for the transit of illicit drugs, smuggling, and ever-present tide of illegal migration of those attempting to cross from Africa to Europe in a hope of a better life. The importance of the Mediterranean has skyrocketed over the years due to the discovery of rich energy reserves, mostly gas, in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Mediterranean also hosts several important energy pipelines, cables, and other infrastructures. Europe's energy security will be increasingly interconnected with supplies from North and Sub-Saharan Africa and the Gulf, not only of fossil fuels, but also of green energy products in the perspective of the transition to a decarbonized economy. The war in Ukraine, the sanction on Russia, as well as the Russian use of energy as a weapon against Europe have vastly increased the importance of the Mediterranean. The resulting need for Italy to continue to increase its capability to control this critical sea line of communication alongside the Sixth Fleet is paramount. The processing underway call for increasing and pragmatic presence. We intend to combine realism and the ability to create operational and institutional relationships that foster lasting and respectful collaboration and dialogue and facilitate the management of existing tension. The military policy should be regarded as a reliant bridge of dialogue and cooperation. And this approach relies on the ability to project internationally our capacity to provide security and capacity building. These commitments are of a magnitude without precedent for Italy and our armed forces and illustrate our can-do burden-sharing attitude in fostering international peace and security. We are always ready to accept additional burden resulting from a higher level of inclusion in the NATO and US lead force contribution and decision mechanism. Thank you for your attention. Of course, I will be ready for question. How did I go?
That was wonderful, Admiral Dragone. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Atlantic Council. So that was a very helpful framework of the range of security challenges facing Europe, from the Arctic down to Africa and Italy's role. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions from my side, and then I would really encourage our online and in-person audience to please submit your questions. I will be tracking them and asking as many as we can fit into the short time that we have here. But Admiral Dragone, so as our president and CEO here at the Atlantic Council, Fred Kemp, calls it, we are in this period of an inflection point in history, meaning a transition in the geopolitical situation. And you described a lot of those challenges that we're facing, from the rise of China to obviously the ongoing war on the European continent. What do you perceive are the main triggers of change, and how are they affecting Italian defense policy, both in the short term and the long term?
Well, I don't want to go counterflow with our president and our CEO, but I would step back in 2014. In my opinion, that has been at least the very first and probably the most important inflection point. Just because at that time we witnessed the violence, turmoil in Syria, in North Africa, in Iraq. One nation, let's call it with her name, Russia, invaded another country, and that was for the first time after World War II, and decided to use the military means to take part of another country. Again, ISIS ran through from north west down south Iraq. I mean, jeopardizing the capital too. I remember that was again back in 2014. They were using, bombing. They were using conventional warfare, unconventional warfare. They were using chemical warfare, mobile, small team, all that we call hybrid warfare. And then, if we look back at that time, we can find a lot of affinity with what's going on now. They have been using probably for the first time the hybrid approach, the hybrid warfare, and they are doing that today too. The only difference is that the size of the usage of this kind of war, and they are using the same old means, the same old system, but in a more advanced and connected society. So this is the big issue. So if we look back at that time, we got a lot of things and lesson learned for today's events. How to face them and how to handle them? Probably partnership is a key word I would use. Today we need to perceive and go for stronger alliance partner. When I say partner, I mean reliable, capable, interconnected partners. And we have to think about our own resilience, probably, but above all, the alliance, the community, the partnership, resilience and capability to face this kind of new war or new actions.
Thank you. So you mentioned alliances, the importance of alliances and partnerships, and I think we can all agree that the war in Ukraine has really revealed the importance of transatlantic unity, solidarity, and NATO and the EU, I think, have been important enablers of bringing countries together. Nevertheless, as the war goes on, and European publics experience, domestic energy and economic costs of the war effort, there does seem to be some fluidity in the political stances of some European countries. So how do you see the future of common defense policy in light of that fluidity? And what do you think are the effects of the conflict on a hypothetical European common defense?
Hypothetical. Why hypothetical? We are striving for it. No, two things. One of the, I think, of the strategic goal of President Putin was on the aftermath of, let's call it, Afghanistan failure, to demonstrate that NATO was not working for the second time in a short time. And that was a failure because not only NATO reacted promptly, swiftly, and I'll tell you what, I've been there sometime and just take 30 countries and get them on board in a so short time like we did. That's an achievement. I've been through that, and that was really an achievement. And so Mr. Putin failed here because he didn't succeed in demonstrating that NATO is a failing alliance, but it's a strong, working and reliable alliance. But just add to this that because of Putin's move, let me say wrong move strategically speaking, we got two more members in the in NATO, and one of them is right on the border of Russia. So this I would call it a total strategic failure. On the other side, NATO worked properly, but also on the European side, we got a big kick in getting ahead with our up to a certain point theoretical European defense. Now we are walking at a fast pace toward a real European defense, because Europe on one side reacted again promptly and together to support Ukraine. On the other side, with the strategic compass, they put down points to increase, to achieve and increase a real capability as a war alliance. We are operationalizing the European Union because we need that. We need C2, a chain of command, a military chain of command, which was not yet in place, but now we are going in that direction strongly and convinced, and that was another achievement that we got from this unfortunately event of the Russia-Ukraine war. I'll tell you just one thing. In 2025, probably the RDC, the acronym is, I hate acronyms, okay, the acronym should be Rapid Deployable Capacity, 5,000 soldiers ready to be deployed for hostage rescue and any kind of operational stuff, also outside European borders, and this means something. And probably Ukraine crisis helped us waken us up a little bit. So I think we are unfortunately, because of the war, we are in the right direction to demonstrate that the alliance is strong and Europe is growing up.
Mm. So in your opening remarks, you mentioned the Wagner Group and the importance of acting in geostrategic areas like the Mediterranean. And we know instability in the southern Mediterranean has arguably allowed for the penetration of groups like the Wagner Group in Libya and elsewhere across Africa. I mean, to a degree, I think until the war in Ukraine, we've somewhat deprioritized in NATO, in the EU, groups like Wagner. And we know, I think the war has really brought to light how essential the Wagner Group has been as an instrument of Russian aggression. So what are your perceptions on this issue? What possible countermeasures can Italy and other European countries take to stem the influence and effectiveness of a group like Wagner?
I was almost making a joke in just when I will retire, I will join the Wagner Group if they pay well, but no.
I hope not.
They don't have a navy, right, in the Wagner Group? Probably. But getting back on serious stuff, the key word is presence. Every single time we left any kind of, let's say the Republic of Central Africa, Mali, and so on, whenever the Western countries retreat and leave a vacuum, they jump in. So probably a more close strategic vision among NATO, European Union, United Nations, so on, over certain critical areas should be a good move to try to not to leave any gap. And again, the key word would be presence. Be there, help the country who hosts us and who ask to be helped by us. Be there with a presence, a discreet, I mean, a presence who is not invading, is constructive, doesn't have any colonialism flavor, and just don't leave vacuum, don't leave space, don't leave room for them, because they are ready to jump in.
So what is, I would be misguided if I didn't ask you questions about the kind of the state of the Italian armed forces.
It's good, it's very, very good, outstanding.
So what is the state of the Italian defense ecosystem today? And in your opinion, what are its strengths and what are its weaknesses, or the areas in which you're trying to develop?
We are honestly, we are getting a lot of lessons from the Ukrainian war. I don't want to say that we totally disregard it, but no, the noise of tanks and shells and missiles was not at the very, very, very top. We have been accustomed for the latest 20 years to asymmetric war, to terrorism. So all of us, also our mentality was kind of turning toward that direction. Now we have to really, readjust that. I think we are in pretty good shape if we keep and if we try to maintain, which is a fact, our technological advantage. This is going to guarantee us what we used to say the technical deterrence. I think that the nuclear deterrence, which was the traditional one I was accustomed to when I was young, I don't want to say that it is not working, but no, it was not working the way we expected. On the other side, a real technological advantage could be the guarantee that the hypothetical adversary would be convinced not to attack and not to take any action, because, thanks to this kind of advantage, technological advantage that we have, it is inconvenient from the economic, from the military, from the social point of view to attack. Just pass me one thing that probably if we succeed on this, in keeping our advantage, we can win the war before it starts, probably.
Okay. I see some audience questions coming in. I would encourage you to please submit some. So Admiral, you were just talking about technological advantage and its importance for deterrence. In your recently released Chief of Defense Strategic Concept, congratulations, by the way, you talk about a new deterrence paradigm and the need to harness technological advancements to achieve joint and multi-domain operations. Can you expand on what you mean by this concept and what that new deterrence paradigm means to you?
Well, we are now moving toward a multi-domain battlefield, let's say. This is a mandatory path, a mandatory road to, as I said, to maintain, to switch to digitalize operations, to just improve our capability on a traditional domain, land, air, and sea, but dramatically take into consideration, I mean, space and cyber. Space, we are not doing that already, but we will fight. In space, we will fight. We got, I think, a strong message from Russia. It was back in November 2014, probably. They shot down their own, an old 1984 satellite, almost useless, but they do it with a let's call it interstellar missile. Yeah. So, despite that, everybody was scared by the debris, 1,500 debris, but the real thing was the message that they gave us, that we are going to fight in the space. So, defense must be there. On the other side, cyber has been, I mean, part of the game again, when we were back in 2014. Probably everybody recalls the little green man going through borders and just doing all this kind of stuff. And more than that, the cognitive domain. I mean, again, we are fighting battles on informations. Information is going to influence public opinions. Public opinions are going to influence decision makers, and this kind of cognitive domain is going to influence, probably they did it somewhere, elections. Yeah. So again, these are the new domains that we need abruptly put into our equation and give them the proper weight, because they are making difference. Yeah. And this is what I call the technological advantage that we need strive for, and which will give us, probably, if we can keep it, which will give us the capability to deter war.
It's I'm glad you brought up the space and cyber domains, and I know that the Italian defense industry has some really burgeoning companies putting forward space capabilities that I think are really necessary for future space security. So we have some good questions coming in. We have one here from Natalia Drozdiak from Bloomberg. Natalia asks, I would love to ask Admiral Dragone on his comment about the war in Ukraine and the potential for diplomatic efforts following the counteroffensive this year. French President Emmanuel Macron has been trying to involve his Chinese counterparts to start work on a framework for peace talks, and I know you mentioned that. What are your views on this? Is it realistic to think that China can help mediate the conflict?
At this point, I would consider everything. So, if they got 12 points, I think that China proposed 12 points for peace. Maybe a couple could be good. Why not? We need to consider, we need to honor that. I think, are them in a good faith? I hope so, but whatever. If there is anything which can, I mean, just disconnect what was going on there, they are killing themselves probably for nothing now, because they're stuck over there, and there will be probably an offensive. Yes, there will be a winner or a loser. My personal opinion, I don't think so. So anything which is changing this bad equilibrium that we have having over there, it's welcome. Need to be considered, need to be honored, no matter who's proposing it. So anything is welcome. The Italian the Italian posture is that it is unacceptable that one nation invaded, that tanks go through borders of another nation. That's something that it is not possible to be accepted by the international community, which we belong to. Having said that, I mean, at a certain point, I hope that they will find a way to sit and try to discuss. Other than that, I mean, I don't see any other solution. Any other solution on Ukrainian. I think that Mr. Putin will not get his strategic goals, just to probably to get up to the capital and have a Lukashenko type government over there. For the Ukrainian, it will be hard to get back all the territories. I mean, probably they can, but probably they will come to a point in which they need to sit down and negotiate.
So one of the major challenges that I think we're all facing as allies and partners supporting Ukraine is how to maintain a steady supply of arms and munition to Ukraine without letting our own stockpiles dwindle to the point where we jeopardize our own country's readiness and our ability to really both procure but also produce the amount of ammunition and arms that they're going through. It has been a real challenge, I think, including in the US. How is Italy grappling with that challenge whilst trying to support Ukraine and be an important member as part of that cohesive effort?
We need to support Ukraine up to the end. That's a fact. Probably we need also to review our, defense industry policy. Again, in this area, we have been spoiled by 20 years of unconventional war, of anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism, which is a type of confrontation which doesn't ask and doesn't require a lot of massive usage of armament. The Ukrainian crisis shows that that's not true anymore. My opinion, we need the defense industry totally involved in defense. So the defense industry is part of the defense of a country. This means that probably we have to change our paradigm. This means that probably we need to get to a middle point in which probably they produce more armaments, more weapons, and they accept the risk to keep them in their stock. We buy more, and we accept the risk to keep them in our stock, in our storage, and hopefully we will not use it, and they stay there. This means this is a victory from my point of view. But we have to, since our soldiers risk their life in the trench, probably the industry need to risk a little bit more in producing and look for return of investment not in 3 years, but in 15. This means directly helping the defense of their country.
Thank you. So we've got some great audience questions coming in. We have one here from Raleigh Sword. Raleigh asks, what are Italy's views on what strategic autonomy means for the European Union? Are there areas in all European defense capabilities in which you expect there realistically to be more joint collaboration to develop capabilities? What are the prospects of overcoming the standardization gap that exists across European equipment and inventory from country to country?
That's true. We cannot accept anymore that the European Union countries got more than 100 or 130 weapon systems. In the United States, probably there are 30 to 40. So this just gives you an idea that there is something that we need to take care of over there, across the pond on the other side. We have not been accustomed probably in the past to overcome our misjudged sense of sovereignty. We probably have to step back a little bit. This doesn't mean that we are losing, again, sovereignty in our country, but probably the key word is going more in deep with the joint venture international programs, and probably on a Europe map, just try to divide and share the effort. Just theoretically speaking, we are talking about 155 shells. Probably that kind of industry located in, I just say, in France, will be the one producing pretty much of everybody. And this is going to be true for missiles, for 105, for grenade, for anything. Probably we need to overcome a little bit this sense of isolation that we have been accustomed to in the past. Our industry must a little bit be more oriented in joint venture in the international programs, in trying to get the best, the most for our own country, but not to forget that probably sharing efforts, sharing knowledge and know-how is going to get us closer to the strategic independence, which is not achievable from my point of view. We still will be able to talk with the other country, U.S., Israel, for example. They are the traditional counterparts. We will still be doing that, but probably on a lower level, having the capability in Europe as a whole to produce what we need, and to standardize what we need, and to be able to share quickly what is necessary to one or the other.
And the European Defence Fund, I think, is set to grow by orders of magnitude, I think, to really help with removing some of that duplication across European industries. But from what you describe, it's a balance, right, between protecting your national industry and then prioritizing kind of developing the capabilities needed across Europe.
We need to move toward that direction, probably.
Yeah. So we've got another question here from Andrea Cellino. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. Andrea asks, Admiral, you correctly highlighted the importance of fostering security cooperation across the Mediterranean, involving not only European Union and NATO countries, but also southern partners. How is Italy viewing the process of cooperating with and supporting security forces in potentially unstable or fragile countries in the Med, for example, Libya and Tunisia? What lessons can Italy offer other European countries in this area?
Let's say that probably we should get rid of the traditional mindset of a strong alliance or, blocks and so on. Probably now it's time to what we call a variable geometry not in an alliance, but in moving in the wider Mediterranean, trying to stabilize the whole system, trying to help some countries in capacity and also institution building, which they need, with the presence which is not interfering with their freedom, with their way of governing their own country, and just act like a bridge between. That's something that we in the Italy defense, we are strongly pursuing, like a bridge between this kind of country, a little bit more. In an unbalanced situation, in critical situation, a bridge toward Europe's, just being entry-exit point or just modem, the way you want to call it. But they need, and everywhere we are now, I'm speaking about Italy, we have been asked for. The host nation asked us to help them in this, that, and that. We think we need to keep on doing this very, very politely, not being intruders, and really honestly, and when I say honestly, I underline that, without going there like a new colonial power, helping them in developing their own economy. Are we doing this? I don't answer.
I appreciate your honesty. So I'd be remiss if I don't bring up kind of force modernization, force structure, and a lot of the kind of the trade-offs around that I think gets tied in with the resources that one has to spend on the armed forces. And I know Italy's military expenditure has been increasing since 2015. It was 1.54% of GDP last year, and I know that there's a commitment to reach 2% of GDP.
Minimum.
I think the last government said by 2028, but that may change. So as the Ministry of Defense, and you really consider the priorities for defense spending, right, from modernization to integration and interoperability, what, in your opinion, are the most important priorities to help put the Italian armed forces in the best position possible?
We need to go through and close our process in reaching total jointness of our armed forces. I mean, before being the child, I was a Navy chief. So before being a policeman, I was a thief. So I know it's the story. It's kind of challenging transition, because let's say like the way it is. I mean, whenever you go to a complete real joint system, you take something off the single armed forces. So we need really to get everybody on board and just metabolize this idea. Whenever we are going to be able to achieve this, which is, I mean, we are in process in doing that, and we are pushing hard to do that. The natural step forward is have an armed forces system which is multi-domain, and we need to integrate all of them, being able to move, operate, and hopefully win in a really complex multi-domain scenario. Mm. That's something that probably is a common issue and request for all the European countries. We have a lot of work to do, and I think we need to speed it up. But that should be the end point that we need to strive for.
So we have another audience question here, and I don't know who it's from, so nameless, but the person asked, given the evident difference in risk appetites among European nations, such as Germany and Poland, what are the prospects for a pro-Ukraine coalition in the face of the coming winter? Not sure if they mean offensive.
I'm lost.
Yeah, I think probably the question is getting at maintaining transatlantic unity, and whether there is longevity for maintaining that unity in our support of Ukraine in the war.
Well, as time goes by, I mean, we naturally witness. Unfortunately, we got accustomed to war. On the 25th of February, on the 26th of February, Ukraine was in the front page, right, of newspaper. Now maybe we are on a 4th, 5th page, on a news, on a TVs. It is not probably anymore the very first one. So we are kind of getting accustomed to this. And also, honestly, also the alliance sometimes has, I mean, different posture. The public opinion of every single nation is going to influence, of course, and that's natural. That's part of the game, because of sanctions. Sometimes sanction is affecting Russia, but us too. Just take a glance at the gas price, for example. And as we proceed on this, we need really to strongly try to keep our position, because it becomes harder, not on the eastern, on the outside front, but from within. Try to explain what's going on, probably putting on the table results. If there is something, if we can just give the idea that probably negotiation time is approaching, if we hold it, if we don't have any kind of flexibility in our posture, we are still, and we stay still side of Ukraine, probably is part of the game we should try to tell everybody.
So I think
which is not easy. Which is not easy.
Yes, it's not. I think we have time for one more question. So you're here in Washington and you're meeting with U.S. defense and national security officials. So we're really thrilled that you came to us as part of your visit. And I know back in March, you met with the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, in Rome. And from my understanding, you discussed shared commitments from training to operations, procurement, and technology research and development. What are your priorities for further strengthening U.S. and Italian defense cooperation?
If I tell you, I have to kill you. No, this is, I think it's a Top Gun quote, I think. Well, you know, the link, the transatlantic link between U.S. and Italy is a strong one. It's within the alliance. U.S. is the reference point. What is now, I think, mandatory is keep on showing the alliance, the link. I mean, the way we are connected, as stronger as ever. We have more than, with the families, more than 30,000 U.S. troops in Italy, and it is a strong message. It is a strong message that must go outside. We improve our joint exercises, also because we have a bunch of new guys in Mediterranean, so we have to face this kind of threat. We do it properly because we really, not going into detail, but we really confine. I mean, we really put and demonstrate that Mediterranean is ours. I mean, it's ours, I mean, as an alliance, with all the battle group and so on going back and forth. Even when the presence of a Russia ship were kind of increasing, that was back, I think, let's say, 2 or 3 months after the beginning of the war. But these are messages that we need to keep on telling everybody, that we are up to speed, that we are fine-tuned, that we are interoperable. We are jets jumping on aircraft back and forth, and we lose sight of them basically at the end of the day. But you know, we are doing that, and I think that this must be read as a strong message. And with Mark Milley, we are really totally connected on this and sharing the same idea. Let's see, we met aside from the contact group every 6 to 8 months, but again, it's music.
Well, Admiral Dragone, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and I think a lot of the issues that you've addressed has been very helpful insight for us in Washington to hear about Italian defense priorities and the importance of the US-Italian relationship. I know it's something that we believe very strongly in here at the Atlantic Council. A big thank you to our virtual and our in-person audience for joining us. This has been fantastic. Tune back in for our future events, and thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.